educators will obviously see themselves in this book because it is a book where education plays an incredibly important role. And the main character is someone who has an ability, and her way to get out of the desperate situation that she is in is through school and through education and through teachers. And I think that's an important message to give to young people. And not everyone is as gifted as she is, but the point is not how gifted you are, but how much you can do for yourself through school. And I do hope that teachers and other people who may read the book, that they perhaps become more aware of who their students are and who they might be when they're not at school, and how very different that might be from the child they see at school. I think for students, I hope that it affirms that, that affirms the fact that you might be living really a double life, just like Kimberly Chang in the book, and that you are not the only one living this double life, and that there is still hope, even though at times it may seem like there is no hope. There was a class where we had to have a daily current events quiz. Every day, it was just a few simple little questions about what were the headlines of the paper that day. And the intentions were great. The intentions were to keep us up to date on what was going on in the world. And the teacher did not understand why we couldn't simply look at our parents' New York Times. Well, there was no New York Times in my house. There were no magazines, there were no newspapers in English. And I worked at the factory. I left school, elementary school, at 3 o'clock, and I went to the factory in Chinatown, and I worked until 9 or 10 p.m. So I did all my homework at the factory or on the subway. And when we were at the factory, we were next to the steamers that emitted incredibly loud, high whistling shrieks every 5 minutes. So it was impossible to listen to the radio. By the time I got home, even if I could have understood the radio with my level of English at that point. And then by the time we got home, it was like 10 at night. I was 5 years old. I mean, by the time the current events quizzes came, I was probably closer to 10. But I was not going to stay up and watch the late night news before falling exhausted into bed. So there was no way I could pass those current events quizzes. And what happened was I failed them. I failed them day after day after day. And I never told the truth about, it never even occurred to me to tell the truth about the situation. I think when the teacher asked me, I lied feebly, which, of course the teacher could tell it was a lie, but I was not going to tell the truth about my situation. And I didn't feel like there was an opening for me to tell the truth. So I think that that is something an educator can be aware of, that you see the child looks happy and well adjusted. You may feel there's something you don't know, and it may very well be true that the child lives in a completely different reality than the one that you know. Something very important to me in the book was how to represent language and how to recreate that experience of being an outsider. Why don't I put us so far inside the head and heart of a Chinese immigrant that we can only hear and feel what they do? So in the book, I developed a technique of using English so that we hear only what Kimberly, my heroine, can understand. But what she can't understand, we don't hear. So the security guard can say, "Go to for sure." And she doesn't know where to go to find the classroom, and we don't either. But we are expected to be able to find that classroom, just as she is. But on the other hand, the gift that we are given in the book is that we become fluent Chinese speakers. And instead of hearing Chinese with a little, bit of Chinese sounding words in the middle, what I decided to do was to render it as clearly as possible in English, so that we hear expressions like, "Oh, that's picking up a dead chicken," which means that's a piece of cake. That's something that's lying on the ground waiting for you to find it. And that we hear expressions like that in the original Chinese. We can understand them as easily and as perfectly as Kimberly does. So that use of language was something that was very important to me in writing the book. And so an educator could also approach the book from that point of view. One of the hopes I had for this book was that, you know, you go on the bus or the subway and you see a woman and she's foreign and she's wearing these like weird clothes and she's got these packages that smell funny. God, she doesn't even speak English, you know. And, you know, it's very easy to make that judgment and to say, well, she's just other. You know, she doesn't belong in my reality, and never to think about her again. But I hoped that after people read my book that they would think, you know, that person could be Kimberly Chang's mother, who we know from the book is an articulate, wise, funny, well-educated person in her own language, but can't speak English. And in English can only say things like, have a nice day. So it was really my deepest hope with this book that people would realize, okay, there's a kind of curtain of language and culture that keeps us from each other. But if you look behind it, what you find can be very surprising. One of the nicest things I heard said about my book was by the principal of a school where I gave a talk. And she said, we assigned your book and we were amazed by the reaction of the students because our school is quite diverse. You know, some of them are kids who are probably very much in a similar position to your main character, but some of them are kids that are from completely different world. And she said the kids were just riveted by this book because on the one hand, the ones that were in a similar situation felt like for the first time someone was telling their story and giving them hope. And for the kids who weren't in that situation, they felt like, well, for the first time, we understand what other kids might be going through. We understand why they're acting the way they are, why they may seem tired or aloof or whatever. And she said it's done a tremendous amount for us in terms of deepening the sense of unity and compassion at our school. So that was a wonderful thing to hear, and I would hope that it could do that for other people as well.